Thank you very much. When she says a legend, what she means is I'm very, very old. We're just talking about Jess's birthday. She's 30 years younger than I am. But she'll grow out of it.
I will. I hope.
It is hard for me to talk about freedom for us without acknowledging its absence for our very brave sisters in Afghanistan or in Iran, or indeed for lesbians in Uganda and elsewhere. And I'm really humbled to even be on the same platform as someone whose whole perspective makes me feel very privileged to be a woman in this country. So I hope she and others will forgive us, who by comparison are in a really good position to still complain and say there's more to do. So I hope we can be forgiven for that. Because it may look like trivia that we raise compared with women who are being so badly abused and don't have rights in those other countries to even dress as they want or anything else. But I do want to look at the challenges that we face here. And partly because as it's not just me that's old, but actually our feminist movement is quite old in this country. And if we fail to stop the backtracking that's happening, and if we fail to continue our feminist movement, then that is quite a signal to other countries who look to us for leadership. And a lot of countries do. I mean, whenever we think we've got problems, there are a number who say, but you did so much more. So what we do is important for women in this country, but I think it's also an important signal to people elsewhere. And I'm just going to raise three, I hope, very quick issues to talk about, which are sport, single-sex provision, and the freedom to speak about these. Now on sport, it's very hard that I have to say that sport should be fair. Who would have thought that anyone from a public platform had to say that? You know, we've got the Paralympics, which have been phenomenal for enable people who don't have the same exact bodies as you know, other people to be able still to excel, to win gold medals and everything else. And we've seen that that is a way of having a very fair sport for people of similar physical backgrounds. And I think we've been very proud of what we've done on that. But so we just took for granted that that's why we have women's tennis, that's why we have women's rugby, that's why we have women's swimming and all of those sports, so that everyone can excel, not just men. And that this has given women the ability to have phenomenal careers as athletes. And as you know, one of our great Olympian athletes says, a swimmer, you know, when she was competing, she had to go against Russians, they were at the time, or Soviets, who were pumped up by drugs, by testosterone. And the idea now that women's sports people might have to compete against someone born a man who may have used some drugs to be able to compete as a woman is quite extraordinary. And I find it. I find it hard that I need to say it. But actually, yes, our bodies are different from men's. You know, I think we've got rather good bodies ourselves. But you know, let's run our own races and leave them to run theirs. Now, that is very important, as I say, at elite level of sports. But actually, there will be no women at elite levels if they can't compete at amateur, at grassroots. Because if a school is sending its top 3 girls to be able to compete, say, at county level, and that 2 of those 3 are actually boys, you are excluding already at that level girls from making the next step up. So, you know, let's stop this nonsense that there are certain men who can compete against women. Let us run our races, let them run theirs. And if we want to have a trans category, that's fine. But I understand that the 2 sports that then did open a trans category, there were no takers for it.
Funny that.
Funny that? Who'd have thought? In other words, they only wanted to compete against us, and they didn't really want to compete in any fairness. So, yeah, no to men in our sports. I think that's easy enough. And that's the park run as well, by the way. And that takes me on to single-sex provision, because actually, do I really need to say it? It just that we need our own provision, either for dignity or for privacy or for safety. It just seems to me this is so obvious. It's very hard that I need to come here. And I say to Michael Crick, who I have known and worked with for many, many years, and I actually quite like him, but if he thinks that the odd rape in hospital is okay so as to allow men into women's wards, I say to Michael Crick, you've just got it wrong. There should be no men on women's wards. Again, because I'm so old, I was involved, I think it was 40 or 45 years ago, of campaigning for single-sex wards, because there had been a period, that not many of you in the room will remember, when there was a whole move to move to more mixed wards. And we campaigned and we stopped that. So the idea now that we're getting men back into our wards, no to that. And the other issue about this is that going to, sex attacks on women and girls, we also know, I don't think Jess actually mentioned this, that one of the precursors is flashing. And yet here we have a whole lot of people who say they are concerned about attacks on women and girls, but seem to think it's quite all right for male genitalia to walk into the changing rooms of women changing for sports. Now, my granddaughter swims in a polo team. I mean, I don't want her changing and finding a man walking into her changing rooms. Is that too much to ask? Good, I'm glad about that, because sometimes there's been time I was thinking, my God, do I really need to say that? So let's have no to flashing, and it is really important, not just for the young girls. I could put up with a man flashing and I can know how to deal with it, but actually us old women, we have some dignity that we want to support too, and I don't want them wandering in when I'm half-dressed. Not a pretty sight, and they shouldn't be there. So no to any of that, and no to having, without their permission, any of our disabled or any other women in hospital or at home having intimate care from somebody. No. And finally, our freedom even to say these things. The idea that I've had to say that, and that some of us have not been able to, in public meetings, to say the things I've just said, which actually are just so obvious. I do say, not to the men in this room because you're here, but to the men outside, it is time you stood up and supported the rights of women to talk about the rights of women. Because we will be like Putin's Russia, or we will be about Iran, if we are shutting down the ability for, or hounding women for saying biological men are not biological women. Even those people who may disagree with me on that, I think, rather easy statement, I think there's two sexes in the world, there's them and there's us. But even if people who don't agree with that, surely every person in the labour movement should be standing up to say, I have the right to say that. Because that is a really big issue for the future of democracy. I said it yesterday, and I'm sorry I'm going to repeat it, but George Orwell said, if liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. Now, I can't believe there is anyone who doesn't want to believe that there are men and there are women and they're two different categories, but there you are. We must fight for the right and the freedom of all of us in our own political party, at ward level, at constituency level, in Parliament, or here at party conference, to say something rather simple. Because honestly, we cannot stand up and talk about the rights of people and women in Iran if we don't do the very minimum, which is allow us to speak openly here. Thanks for all being here today. I'm sorry, but it needs it.